Before he was shredding stages and sparking some of metal's fiercest rivalries, Dave Mustaine was just a kid in La Mesa, California, born on September 13, 1961. His early life was far from stable. His father, John Mustaine, was an alcoholic who frequently uprooted the family, forcing young Dave to endure a chaotic and often abusive environment. Eventually, his mother, Emily, took Dave and fled the instability, but the emotional scars lingered. As a teen growing up in Huntington Beach, Dave turned to music as both an escape and a rebellion. His first steps into the world of heavy music began with bands like Panic and early garage rock groups where he was already showing a flair for blistering solos and heavy rhythm playing. His early influences ranged from Led Zeppelin and AC/DC to Judas Priest and UFO bands that would heavily influence his later writing style. He sold drugs to support himself, and ironically, it was one of his marijuana clients who traded guitar lessons for weed. That's how he sharpened his chops. This wasn't the story of a suburban kid picking up a Strat for fun. This was survival. Guitar wasn't a hobby, it was an identity and an escape plan. In 1981, Mustaine auditioned for a new band that was forming in Los Angeles, Metallica. Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield were looking for a guitarist, and when Mustaine plugged in, they reportedly knew within seconds they had their guy. His sound was aggressive, fast, and rough around the edges, exactly what Metallica needed to set them apart from the rest of the LA scene. But the honeymoon didn't last. Though his talent was undeniable, Mustaine's aggressive personality and heavy drinking quickly became a problem. The band was living together, and tensions grew with every beer can and fistfight. During their long trip to New York to record their debut album Kill 'Em All, Mustaine's behavior spiraled further out of control. Just days before they were scheduled to record, Lars and James fired him without warning. They woke him up on April 11, 1983, handed him a bus ticket, and sent him packing back to California. No plane. No discussion. Just exile. The band had already brought in Kirk Hammett from Exodus as his replacement. Mustaine was livid. Humiliated and furious, he spent the entire cross-country bus ride plotting revenge. And out of that anger, a new vision was born. He would start a band that would blow Metallica off the map. That band would be called Megadeth. Fueled by betrayal and rage, Dave Mustaine returned to California in 1983 and wasted no time putting together a new band. The name Megadeth came from a flyer he found on the bus ride home, referencing the term Megadeth, a unit used to measure 1 million deaths caused by nuclear warfare. He dropped the A and made it his own. It was fast, brutal, and apocalyptic, just like the music he planned to unleash. After cycling through early bandmates, Mustaine found bassist David Ellefson, who became his longtime collaborator. The early days were rough. They lived in squalor, sold drugs to get by, and rehearsed constantly. They were broke, but determined. Unlike Metallica's more methodical rise, Megadeth came from the streets, scrappy, furious, and unpredictable. Their early demos, like Last Rites and Mechanics, started building a cult following. Mechanics was especially notable. It was a song Mustaine had originally written for Metallica, later rewritten by them as The Four Horsemen. Dave's version was faster, rawer, and more punk-inflected. It was his direct middle finger to his former bandmates. In 1985, Megadeth signed with Combat Records and released their debut album, Killing Is My Business, and Business Is Good. The record was fast and unpolished, but it had teeth. Critics were divided, but underground fans loved it. It wasn't about perfection, it was about attitude. And Mustaine had plenty of it. The real breakthrough came in 1986. Megadeth signed to Capitol Records and released Peace Cells. But who's buying? With a bigger budget and better production, the band crafted one of thrash metal's defining albums. The title track became an anthem. Its bass line, played by Ellefson, was so iconic that MTV later used it in news segments. The record wasn't just brutal, it was smart, political, and aggressive in a way that stood apart from other bands in the genre. But the band's rise was plagued by self-destruction. Mustaine was battling addiction, and so were other members. Heroin, alcohol, and internal fights constantly threatened to tear the band apart. Even as they were earning critical respect and mainstream interest, Megadeth was teetering on collapse. Still, their musicianship couldn't be denied. Mustaine's riffs were intricate and chaotic, and his lyrics questioned authority, war, and corruption. He wasn't just lashing out, he was thinking critically, and fans responded to that intensity. By the late 80s, Megadeth had established themselves as one of the big four of thrash metal alongside Metallica, Slayer, and Anthrax. But behind the scenes, chaos was brewing. Dave's obsession with beating Metallica pushed him harder, but it also drove him to the brink. By 1990, Dave Mustaine had clawed his way out of the underground. With a new lineup, Marty Friedman on lead guitar, Nick Menza on drums, and longtime bassist David Ellefson, Megadeth was about to hit its creative peak. The result was Rust in Peace, an album that would define not only the band, but the thrash genre itself. Unlike the chaotic energy of earlier records, Rust in Peace was precise, virtuosic, and incredibly ambitious. Tracks like Holy Wars, The Punishment Due, and Hangar 18 showcased Mustaine's mastery of political songwriting and complex guitar composition. Friedman's neoclassical shredding balanced Dave's ferocity, and Menza's drumming added tight, jazz-influenced rhythm. The album was a critical triumph and commercial success. It went platinum, earned a Grammy nomination, and turned Megadeth into a global force. Metallica may have released the Black Album around the same time and crossed over to the mainstream, but Rust in Peace was the thinking man's thrash, fast, complex, and unapologetically metal. For Dave, it was vindication. He was no longer just the guy Metallica fired. He was now leading one of the most respected bands in heavy metal, with a lineup that rivaled any of his peers. The revenge narrative was fading. Megadeth wasn't just surviving, they were thriving. But the pressure was mounting. The band was still partying hard. Mustaine's addictions hadn't gone away, they'd just become better hidden. And as the 90s progressed, the world of rock was about to change dramatically. In 1992, Megadeth released Countdown to Extinction, a more streamlined, accessible album designed to compete in the wake of Metallica's crossover success. Produced by Max Norman, the record featured songs like Symphony of Destruction, Sweating Bullets, and Foreclosure of a Dream, tracks with massive hooks but still steeped in political and psychological themes. The gamble paid off. Countdown debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200 and eventually went double platinum. Megadeth was now filling arenas, headlining festivals, and appearing on MTV. For the first time, they were seen as a true commercial contender, not just a metal band for purists. But the shift came with tension. Some hardcore fans accused the band of selling out. Mustaine, ever the perfectionist and provocateur, tried to defend the record's depth, insisting it was just as intense, just more focused. In truth, Countdown to Extinction was a smart, calculated move in one of the most successful of their career. Behind the scenes, however, Dave's struggles continued. His heroin and alcohol addictions had spiraled. Band infighting was frequent. And the stress of keeping Megadeth both commercially viable and artistically credible was beginning to wear him down. By the mid-90s, Mustaine had achieved what he'd once only dreamed of. But as always with Dave, the triumph came with consequences. Just as Megadeth reached the summit, the cracks in its foundation were starting to show again. By 1994, the music landscape had changed. Grunge had taken over the airwaves, and bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden were redefining what rock sounded like. Thrash metal was seen by the mainstream as a relic of the 80s, and even giants like Metallica were adapting, softening their edges. Dave Mustaine, ever aware of the commercial tide, tried to evolve too. That year, Megadeth released Euthanasia. It was slower, more melodic, and more polished than their previous work. Songs like A Tout le Monde and Train of Consequences showcased Mustaine's knack for emotional songwriting, with lyrics exploring mortality, addiction, and regret. It was a bold move, and while some die-hard fans recoiled, the album went platinum and kept the band relevant. Still, the shift wasn't just musical. Internally, Mustaine was cracking. Though he claimed sobriety during recording, his struggles with addiction were far from over. His relationship with his bandmates, particularly Marty Friedman, began to fray. Mustaine's perfectionism, ego, and erratic behavior often created tension. Rehearsals turned into arguments, and studio sessions were marred by control issues. In interviews, Dave started sounding less like a triumphant survivor and more like a man grappling with his own image. He was resentful of Metallica's continuing success, angry about the lack of recognition he felt he deserved, and insecure about Megadeth's place in a rock world that no longer celebrated technical prowess or political rage. And then came Cryptic Writings in 1997, a further departure into radio-friendly territory. It yielded hits like Trust and Almost Honest, earning airplay but also alienating some of the fanbase. Megadeth was still in the game, but the identity that had once made them so singular was slipping through Mustaine's fingers. As the 1990s came to a close, Dave Mustaine's personal life was spiraling. The addictions he had battled for years were now back with a vengeance. Heroin, cocaine, alcohol. Mustaine wasn't just flirting with them. He was drowning in them. His erratic behavior became more pronounced, both on and off stage. In 1999, Megadeth released Risk, a record that Mustaine later admitted was a misstep. It was an attempt to capitalize on the success of Cryptic Writings by going even further into accessible territory. But fans and critics panned the album. Even the band's own label wasn't sure what to make of it. This isn't Megadeth, many longtime listeners thought, and they weren't wrong. Internally, things were falling apart. Marty Friedman left the band after clashing with Mustaine over musical direction. Mustaine, ever the control freak, was deeply frustrated by the commercial flop and the criticism. But even deeper than that, he was emotionally and spiritually bankrupt. His family life was strained, his health deteriorating, and his reputation fractured. Then in 2002, a freak accident changed everything. While sleeping in a chair at a rehab center, Mustaine suffered severe nerve damage in his left arm due to radial neuropathy. He woke up unable to move his fingers. For a guitarist, it was devastating. Doctors told him he might never play again. Dave disbanded Megadeth. He was broken physically, mentally, and musically. After nearly 2 decades of chasing validation, climbing charts, and battling demons, it seemed like Mustaine's story had come to a tragic, quiet end. But if history had shown anything, it was this: Dave Mustaine never stayed down for long. Dave Mustaine was not someone who ever took defeat easily. So when doctors told him he might never play guitar again after his 2002 nerve injury, he didn't retreat, he retooled. He underwent intensive physical therapy, spending months trying to regain feeling and movement in his left arm. It wasn't just about music anymore, it was about identity. Playing guitar wasn't something Mustaine did. It was who he was. During this grueling recovery, Mustaine had a spiritual awakening. Raised as a Jehovah's Witness but long estranged from faith, he began exploring Christianity more seriously. In 2003, he publicly declared himself a born-again Christian. This wasn't a gimmick or a PR move. It became a central tenet of his new life, shaping his behavior, interviews, and even his music. He stopped performing certain songs with what he saw as morally questionable themes and began openly thanking God in press conferences and liner notes. By 2004, Mustaine had made what many considered a miraculous recovery. Not only could he play guitar again, he was ready to revive Megadeth, though not with the same lineup. Because of contractual obligations, he recorded The System Has Failed essentially as a solo project under the Megadeth name, with studio musicians rather than his old bandmates. The record was a critical return to form, biting lyrics, intricate riffs, and political fury. Tracks like Kick the Chair and Back in the Day reminded fans why they'd loved Megadeth in the first place. Mustaine toured again. The audience was there. The demand hadn't gone anywhere. Against all odds, he turned a career-ending injury into a comeback story. The press called it redemption. Fans called it overdue. And for Mustaine, it was proof he wasn't finished yet. With The System Has Failed putting Megadeth back on the map, Mustaine got back to doing what he did best, working obsessively, writing constantly, and rebuilding from the ground up. By 2005, he began piecing together a new permanent lineup. Longtime bassist David Ellefson, however, was notably absent. A financial dispute had driven a wedge between them, leading to years of silence and even lawsuits. Their once fraternal bond had curdled into cold professionalism, at least for the time being. Megadeth's next albums, United Abominations, 2007, Endgame, 2009, and 2011, continued the band's critical resurgence. Endgame, in particular, was seen as a modern thrash masterpiece. It blended the fury of Megadeth's early years with Mustaine's matured songwriting skills. Songs like This Day We Fight and 44 Minutes showed that the fire was not only still there, it was blazing. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Mustaine's outspoken personality didn't mellow with age. He continued to make headlines for controversial political statements, feuds with journalists, and on-again, off-again digs at Metallica. His conspiracy-laced interviews drew criticism even from fans, and some wondered if his uncompromising attitude might undo the progress Megadeth had made. And yet, the music kept delivering. Mustaine may have been polarizing, but he remained productive. His faith, too, stayed front and center. He refused to play with bands whose messages clashed with his beliefs, occasionally dropping off festivals if satanic imagery was too prominent. Then in 2010, after years of silence, he and David Ellefson reconciled. The iconic duo reunited for the Rust in Peace 20th anniversary tour. The sight of them sharing a stage again grizzled but sharp brought longtime fans to tears. It was more than nostalgia. It was healing. By the mid-2010s, Megadeth had fully re-established itself as one of thrash metal's last standing giants. They were no longer the angry underdogs chasing Metallica's shadow, they were legends in their own right. With albums like Dystopia, 2016, Mustaine proved that age hadn't dulled his edge. If anything, his riffing was tighter, his lyrics sharper, and his vision more focused. The Dystopia era also brought long overdue recognition. In 2017, Megadeth finally won a Grammy for Best Metal Performance with the title track Dystopia. It was a moment fans had waited for since the 1980s. Mustaine accepted it with class and gratitude, even joking about the awards show accidentally playing Metallica as he walked up. For a man once defined by his feud with his former band, that small flub was symbolic. The industry still confused the two, but Dave had finally carved his own lane, Grammy in hand. Meanwhile, Mustaine's personal life stabilized. He was a devoted family man, often photographed with his wife Pamela and children Justice and Electra. His faith remained a guiding force, and he balanced his beliefs with his career in a genre not exactly known for piety. Interviews during this time reflected a more introspective Dave. He still had opinions often controversial, but he spoke more about gratitude, about pain, and about reconciling the past. When asked about Metallica, he often answered with less venom and more clarity. There was still history, sure, but he seemed more at peace with it. Still, challenges loomed on the horizon. In 2019, Dave Mustaine announced something that shook the metal world. He had been diagnosed with throat cancer. The announcement came via a statement on Megadeth's website in June 2019. "I've been diagnosed with throat cancer," Mustaine wrote. "It's clearly something to be respected and faced head-on, but I've faced obstacles before." It was the kind of news that would bring most people to a screeching halt. But Mustaine? He launched into treatment like he was prepping for a world tour. He canceled most shows but continued working on the upcoming Megadeth album during treatment. He promised fans he wasn't done, and he wasn't. By October, Mustaine completed treatment. And in January 2020, just 7 months after his diagnosis, he returned to the stage in Helsinki, Finland, to roaring fans and tears in his eyes. His voice, though slightly altered, was still commanding. His guitar playing? As blistering as ever. The comeback was more than a musical one, it was spiritual. Mustaine had battled addiction, loss, injury, and now cancer. He came out the other side not just alive, but still fighting. In interviews after his recovery, he spoke about his faith and how it helped carry him through. "I prayed every day," he said. "I know it made a difference." In 2022, Megadeth released The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead, an album recorded partially during Mustaine's cancer battle. It was classic Megadeth, thrashy, snarling, and full of fury, but also full of wisdom. Tracks like We'll Be Back and Night Stalkers showed that even in his 60s, Dave Mustaine hadn't lost a step. Today, Mustaine continues to tour, write, and speak out. He's one of the few metal legends still standing, still pushing, still evolving. Love him or hate him, no one can deny the sheer willpower it took to survive it all. Let me know when you're ready for chapters 13 and 14, which will close out with his legacy, final reflections, and what the future may, or may not, hold. Dave Mustaine's journey is as much about the music as it is about resilience. From his early days as Metallica's original lead guitarist to founding Megadeth, he shaped thrash metal's sound and spirit. His aggressive riffing style, intricate solos, and biting lyrics helped define a genre that remains vital decades later. Countless bands cite Megadeth and Mustaine as influences, names from Slayer to Machine Head, from Testament to Lamb of God. His guitar tone, songwriting, and distinctive voice have become blueprints for metal musicians worldwide. Even his controversial public persona, the outspoken, no-holds-barred attitude, cemented his place as metal's warrior poet. Yet, Mustaine's career has not been without strife. His battles with addiction, health scares, and personal conflicts, including long-standing feuds with Metallica members, have fueled as much discussion as his music. Some critics dismiss him as divisive or difficult, while fans admire his honesty and passion. This duality only adds to the mythos surrounding him. Through it all, Mustaine has remained unapologetically himself. His commitment to his craft and refusal to back down embody the rebellious spirit of rock and metal. He has evolved, but never compromised the core of who he is as an artist. As Mustaine moves forward into the 2020s, his story remains unfinished. His recent health battles have slowed him, but not stopped him. Fans eagerly anticipate what Megadeth will do next, whether that means more touring, new albums, or unexpected collaborations. Mustaine has also expressed interest in mentoring younger musicians and exploring new creative avenues. In interviews, he reflects on his life with gratitude, grateful for the music, the fans, and even the hardships that shaped him. He's learned to embrace both the darkness and light in his story. "I've made mistakes," he admits, "but I wouldn't change a thing because it brought me here." It's a lesson in perseverance and passion that resonates far beyond metal. For the Southern Sound audience, many who grew up with rock and country, with raw emotion and storytelling, Dave Mustaine's tale is one of relentless drive and transformation. It's about survival, creativity, and the unyielding power of music to shape identity and heal wounds. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of Dave Mustaine. His story is a testament to the power of determination and the enduring spirit of rock and roll. If you enjoyed this journey, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next chapter in Southern Sound's exploration of rock legends. Drop a comment below with your favorite Megadeth song or memory. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep the music alive and stay true to your sound.